At 3 in the morning, the Mafia Boss got a call. His secretary was locked in jail asking for him. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a quick favor to ask. Please hit the subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you never miss any of our channel's latest videos. It only takes a moment. It is completely free, and it is one of the best ways to support us as we continue bringing you more dramatic and emotional stories like this one. Your support truly means so much to us. And tell me, where are you watching from today? Share your city or country in the comments below. Thank you so much for being here. Now, let us return to our main character and continue the story. The people who can destroy your empire rarely knock on your front door. They usually have a key. That was the lesson I learned at exactly 3:07 on a cold Thursday morning, when the sound of my phone shattered the silence inside my penthouse. I was already awake. Men like me rarely slept through the night. The city outside my windows stretched for miles beneath a blanket of rain, its streets glowing beneath amber streetlights, every skyscraper standing like another reminder that power was never permanent. I had spent nearly 15 years building everything I owned, one careful decision at a time, and somewhere along the way I had stopped believing that anything could still surprise me. Then my phone rang. Not my personal line. Not the encrypted phone my captains used. It was the number almost nobody had. I answered before the second ring. Damian Moretti. There was a pause, followed by a calm voice that didn't belong to anyone in my organization. Mr. Moretti, this is Lieutenant Daniel Brooks with the Manhattan Police Department. I glanced at the clock beside my bed. 3:07. Police officers didn't call powerful businessmen before sunrise unless someone was dead, missing, or desperate. What happened? I asked. We have a woman in custody. My expression never changed. Congratulations. Another pause. She refused to answer any questions. I waited. She asked for only one person. My grip tightened around the phone. Who? You. The room suddenly felt much quieter than before. Her name is Claire Bennett. For the first time in years, I forgot to breathe. Claire. My secretary. 7 years. 7 years without arriving late once. 7 years of perfectly organized schedules, impossible meetings somehow becoming possible, forgotten anniversaries quietly remembered before I even realized they existed. She never interrupted unless it mattered. Never complained. Never asked about the parts of my life everyone else feared. She simply did her job better than anyone I had ever trusted. And now she was sitting inside a police station asking for me. What is she being charged with? I asked. She won't say anything until she speaks with you. That's not what I asked. The lieutenant cleared his throat. Financial fraud, according to the initial report. But something about this doesn't feel right. Neither did the fact that Claire hadn't called an attorney. She knew 3 of the best lawyers in New York. She scheduled their meetings herself. She knew exactly how these situations worked. If she had asked for me instead, it meant she wanted me to see something before anyone else did. Is she hurt? I finally asked. No, sir. I closed my eyes for 1 second. Claire never asked for help. Not when she worked through pneumonia because my calendar couldn't be delayed. Not when her apartment flooded 2 winters ago. Not even after losing her father. She carried every burden in silence because she believed everyone else already had enough to carry. If she was calling me now, the situation was far worse than an arrest report could explain. Keep her there, I said quietly. I'm on my way. The lieutenant hesitated. Mr. Moretti, she also asked me to tell you one more thing. I reached for my coat without taking my eyes off the rain sliding down the glass. What did she say? His voice dropped almost to a whisper. She said, don't waste time trying to get me out. Find the person who wanted me here. The line went silent. I stood motionless in the middle of my bedroom, listening to the storm outside. Claire wasn't asking me for a rescue. She was warning me. And in my world, warnings delivered at 3 in the morning were never about the person sitting in the jail cell. They were about the people still walking free. I have negotiated billion-dollar deals without raising my voice. I have watched powerful men lose everything because they trusted the wrong smile. But nothing prepared me for the expression on Claire Bennett's face when I walked into the interview room at the precinct. She was sitting behind a thick glass partition beneath cold fluorescent lights that washed every ounce of warmth from the room. Her gray blazer was slightly wrinkled. Her hair no longer perfectly arranged the way it always was by 8 o'clock every morning, but everything else looked exactly the same. Her posture was straight. Her hands rested calmly on the metal table. Even now, She looked more prepared than most executives walking into a board meeting. She noticed me the second I stepped inside. For a brief moment, relief crossed her face before disappearing behind the same composed expression she had worn every day in my office. I picked up the phone hanging beside the glass. She did the same. Neither of us spoke for several seconds. "You should have called Michael," I finally said, referring to the attorney whose number she probably knew better than mine. "He would have been here in 15 minutes. A faint smile touched the corner of her lips. "I did not need a lawyer. You were sitting inside a police station before sunrise." "Exactly." I studied her carefully. Claire never wasted words. If she answered a question with 5 words instead of 20, it was because the other 15 were unnecessary. "Did you do what they are accusing you of?" I asked. She looked directly into my eyes without hesitation. "No." I believed her immediately, not because loyalty made me blind, but because Claire Bennett had never lied to me in 7 years. She had disagreed with me, corrected me, even ignored my instructions once when she believed I was making a mistake. But she had never lied. "Then I will have you released before breakfast." She slowly shook her head. "No." I frowned. "Claire, listen to me." Her voice remained calm, almost gentle. "If you walk into the captain's office and make one phone call, whoever planned this will disappear before noon." My eyes narrowed. What exactly happened? She glanced toward the security camera mounted in the corner before lowering her voice, even though nobody could hear us through the glass. "Yesterday afternoon, a courier delivered an envelope to your office." I remembered. "You signed for it." "Because it was addressed to me." "What was inside?" "Nothing." I waited for more. That is exactly what frightened me. She folded her hands together. An empty envelope. No letter. No return address. No fingerprints according to the detective who questioned me. Why would that matter? Because someone wanted to prove they could place anything on your desk whenever they wanted. The realization settled over me like cold rain. Someone had walked through layers of private security without triggering a single alarm. Someone wanted us to know they had access. What happened next? I asked. Claire reached into the pocket of her blazer and carefully placed a small brass key onto the table. An officer immediately stepped closer, but she simply looked at me. This was hidden inside the lining of the envelope. I stared at the key. It looked ordinary. Worn edges. No label. No markings. Where does it belong? I asked. She slowly shook her head. I do not know. Then why did you keep it? Because someone expected me to destroy it. My pulse slowed instead of racing. That always happened when the situation became dangerous. Clear thinking replaced emotion. And now you are here because of a key? She gave the smallest nod. No. I am here because someone wanted you to stop looking for it. She leaned closer to the glass, her voice almost disappearing beneath the quiet hum of the ventilation system. Damien, do not waste your influence getting me out. Find what that key opens before someone else does. If I leave too soon, they will know we understand the game. Right now, they still believe they are winning. Let them keep believing it for one more day. I have always believed that every lock tells a story about the person who made it. Some are built to keep strangers out. Others are built to keep trusted people from asking the wrong questions. By the time I left the precinct, dawn had not yet reached Manhattan. The streets were nearly empty, washed clean by hours of steady rain, while the city slowly prepared to pretend it had slept peacefully. I sat alone behind the wheel of my black sedan, turning the small brass key over between my fingers. It was heavier than it looked. Old. Solid. Not something purchased from a hardware store last week. Someone had kept this key for years before deciding Claire needed to find it. The question was why. I drove directly to my office instead of returning home. The building was dark except for the security desk in the lobby where the night supervisor immediately stood when I walked through the doors. He greeted me with the same practiced confidence he always had, but this morning I noticed something different. He looked surprised to see me before sunrise. Claire would have noticed that too. She noticed everything. My private office remained exactly as I had left it the previous afternoon. The leather chair sat perfectly centered behind my desk. The bookshelf along the east wall displayed every file in flawless alphabetical order because Claire insisted organization was another form of discipline. Even the coffee mug she had placed beside my computer still held yesterday's untouched espresso. It had gone cold hours ago, yet somehow seeing it there unsettled me more than the empty interview room at the precinct. I walked behind my desk, and opened the top drawer where incoming deliveries were temporarily stored before being processed. Empty. The envelope was gone. Housekeeping would never remove business documents. Neither would Claire. Someone had cleaned my desk after she was arrested. I pressed the intercom. "Have security send me yesterday's surveillance footage." Less than 3 minutes later, my head of security entered carrying a tablet. "We already checked it," he said confidently. "Everything looks normal." I watched the recording from the front lobby first. Couriers arrived. Employees entered. Visitors signed in. Nothing unusual. Then I skipped ahead to the hallway outside my office. At exactly 2:16 in the afternoon, the image froze for less than 2 seconds before continuing as though nothing had happened. I rewound it. The same interruption appeared again. 2 seconds. Almost invisible. "Did you notice this?" I asked. He frowned. "It is probably a system delay." "No." I replayed it again. Someone wanted it to look like one. Claire had worked beside me long enough to recognize patterns hidden inside ordinary routines. She would have seen those missing seconds immediately, which meant whoever erased them knew exactly how observant she was. "Who serviced our camera system this month?" I asked quietly. The security chief checked his records. "Nobody. Maintenance is scheduled for next Tuesday." I looked back at the frozen frame. If no technician had entered the building, then the missing footage had been erased remotely. That required administrator access. Only 4 people possessed those credentials. I knew every one of their names. None of them appeared on my list of suspects yesterday. All 4 appeared on it now. I slipped the brass key into my pocket and stared across the empty office where Claire's desk sat perfectly organized exactly the way she had left it. Then something caught my attention. Her calendar. Every appointment for the week remained neatly written in blue ink except one. Friday at 11:30 had been crossed out with a single black line. No explanation. No replacement meeting. Claire never crossed out appointments without writing the reason underneath. Never. I stepped closer until I noticed 3 tiny words written so lightly, they were almost invisible beneath the black ink. "Check the vault." My heartbeat remained steady, but something deep inside me shifted. Claire had not left me instructions. She had left me a trail. And whoever believed they had trapped her had no idea she had already planned 3 moves ahead. I have trusted vaults more than people for most of my life because steel does not lie and combinations do not betray you. People do both with remarkable ease. Claire knew that. That was why seeing those 3 faint words hidden beneath a line of black ink unsettled me more than the arrest itself. I took the private elevator down 4 levels beneath the building where almost nobody knew another floor even existed. The biometric scanner recognized my fingerprint. The reinforced door unlocked with a quiet mechanical click, and I stepped into the room where I kept the few things money could never replace. Family photographs. Original contracts from the earliest days of my business. A faded leather notebook my father carried before he died. Everything sat exactly where it belonged. At first glance, nothing seemed out of place. Then I remembered something Claire had said years earlier. She once smiled while organizing the shelves and told me, "The safest place to hide something valuable is where everyone believes they already know what is inside." At the time, I thought she was talking about office filing systems. Standing there now, I realized she had been teaching me how she thought. I walked slowly around the room instead of rushing. Every shelf, every drawer, every storage box. Claire never relied on luck. She relied on observation. If she wanted me to find something, she would leave it somewhere only I would understand after paying attention. My eyes stopped on the old wooden humidor sitting beside my father's notebook. I had not opened it in years because I had never smoked cigars. My father had. I lifted the lid. Empty. Or so it appeared. As I closed it, I heard the faintest sound, a soft movement beneath the lining. Carefully pressing along the interior, I found a hidden compartment no larger than my hand. Inside rested a small black flash drive wrapped in a plain white note. There were only 6 words written in Claire's unmistakably neat handwriting. "You were never supposed to find this." I stared at the message for several long seconds. Claire had hidden this before she was arrested. She had expected someone else to search the office. Someone who would stop after finding nothing. Someone impatient. Claire understood that patience was often the difference between surviving and losing everything. I slipped the drive into my pocket instead of plugging it into the secure computer inside the vault. If someone had already reached this far into my organization, I could no longer assume any system connected to my network was safe. As I turned to leave, Another memory surfaced without warning. 7 years earlier, on Claire's first day, I had interviewed dozens of candidates for the executive assistant position. Most arrived with polished resumes and rehearsed confidence. Claire walked in carrying a notebook with coffee stains on the cover and apologized because the subway had stopped unexpectedly. She looked embarrassed, but she never blamed anyone else. Halfway through the interview, I intentionally gave her the wrong meeting time for the following morning. Every other candidate simply wrote it down. Claire looked at the schedule, frowned slightly, and said, "I think someone made a mistake because that overlaps with your meeting at City Hall." She had corrected me before she even worked for me. I hired her 5 minutes later, not because she was organized, because she was willing to tell me when I was wrong. Over the years, that honesty quietly became the foundation beneath everything I built, even if I rarely acknowledged it. Now I stood alone inside the elevator holding evidence she had risked everything to protect, and for the first time I wondered how many disasters she had prevented without ever asking for recognition. The elevator doors opened into the silent lobby just as my phone vibrated again. The caller identification displayed a name I had known for almost 20 years. Michael Reynolds. My attorney. The man I trusted with every legal document I owned. I answered immediately, but before I could speak, his first sentence stopped me cold. "Damien, whatever Claire told you, do not plug that flash drive into any computer. Someone has already been asking whether you found it. I have spent most of my life assuming that information was the most valuable currency in the world. That morning I discovered there was something even more valuable. Timing. Claire had not simply hidden a flash drive. She had hidden the moment when I would understand why she trusted almost no one. I remained inside the empty lobby while Michael Reynolds lowered his voice on the other end of the call. "Listen carefully," he said. "Do not connect that drive to any device you own. Someone has been trying to. Determine whether you recovered it." I walked toward the rain-covered windows, watching the city slowly wake beneath gray skies. "Who asked?" I said. "That is the problem." Michael hesitated. "The request came through one of your own authorization codes." I felt the air leave my lungs, not from fear, but from certainty. Claire had been right. Whoever was orchestrating this already had access to systems that should have been impossible to reach. "Only a handful of people have those credentials," I replied. "I know." His voice became even quieter. "Which means either someone stole them, or someone you trust used them." The line went silent for a moment before I answered. "Meet me at the old library on West 42nd Street in 1 hour. You are not coming to my office." "No." "Good," he said. "Neither am I." The call ended. I slipped the flash drive into the inside pocket of my coat and walked back outside into the cold morning air. Instead of driving directly to the meeting place, I circled the city for nearly 40 minutes, changing routes, stopping twice, watching every vehicle in my mirrors. It was an old habit I had developed years ago, but lately Claire had become even more careful than I was. She often suggested different routes without explaining why, quietly rearranged meetings at the last minute, and insisted certain conversations happen only face-to-face. At the time I assumed she was simply efficient. Now I wondered how long she had known someone was watching us. As traffic slowly thickened, another memory returned. 6 months earlier, Claire had entered my office carrying a stack of contracts that required my signature. She placed them neatly on my desk, then removed one document before I could touch it. "This one needs to wait," she had said. I asked why. She answered with only one sentence. "The numbers are correct, but the timing feels wrong." I almost laughed. Timing was not a legal argument. Yet 3 days later, the company behind that contract announced an internal investigation for financial misconduct. Claire had saved me from attaching my name to a disaster simply because something felt unusual to her. She never claimed extraordinary instincts. She simply paid attention longer than everyone else. I reached the old library 10 minutes early. The building had been closed for renovation for months, leaving the surrounding block unusually quiet. Michael was already waiting inside his sedan, engine off, reading glasses resting low on his nose as though this were an ordinary business meeting instead of a conversation that could change everything. I climbed into the passenger seat without speaking. He looked at me, then at the pocket holding the flash drive. "You brought it." "Of course." He slowly nodded before handing me a folded sheet of paper. "Read the names." There were 6 names listed in neat black ink. Every one belonged to someone inside my organization. Executives, advisors, Security personnel. Trusted professionals. At the bottom of the page, one name had been circled twice. I stared at it for several long seconds. It was not the name I expected to see. Michael watched my expression carefully before speaking again. Damien, whoever built this operation did not start 6 months ago. This has been happening for years. I folded the paper without another word because for the first time since Claire's arrest, I understood the terrifying truth. She had never been protecting my calendar. She had been protecting my blind spots. I used to believe betrayal announced itself with raised voices, desperate excuses, or obvious mistakes. I was wrong. Real betrayal looked exactly like loyalty until the day it no longer needed to pretend. Michael remained silent while I unfolded the paper again, reading the circled name for what felt like the 100th time. Ethan Cole, my chief financial officer. A man who had worked beside me for nearly a decade. The same man who reminded me about tax deadlines, approved expansion budgets, and quietly donated to children's hospitals every Christmas without ever allowing his name to appear in the newspapers. If someone had asked me yesterday to name the least suspicious person in my organization, I would have chosen Ethan without hesitation. How certain are you? I finally asked. Michael reached into his briefcase and placed another folder between us. These are not accusations. They are patterns. Inside were copies of financial authorizations, building access records, and communication logs stretching back almost 4 years. None of them proved Ethan had done anything illegal. Individually, they looked ordinary. Together, they formed something else entirely. Every time sensitive information quietly reached outsiders, Ethan's credentials appeared somewhere nearby. Every time an important meeting changed unexpectedly, Ethan had received an updated schedule within minutes. Every missing piece that had frustrated me for years suddenly aligned into one unmistakable picture. Claire found this. I asked. Michael nodded slowly. Not all at once. She started noticing tiny inconsistencies almost 3 years ago. 3 years. I leaned back against the leather seat, staring through the windshield as morning commuters hurried past carrying coffee cups and briefcases, completely unaware that my entire understanding of loyalty had just changed. While I believed Claire was simply managing my calendar, she had quietly been documenting irregularities nobody else even recognized. She never accused anyone. She never created panic. She simply kept watching. Why did she never tell me? I asked. Michael looked directly at me before answering. Because she believed you would confront the wrong person too early. That answer hurt more than I expected. Not because she doubted my judgment, but because she understood my instincts better than I did. She knew I would protect the people I trusted until undeniable proof forced me to stop. She also knew that confronting Ethan without evidence would only warn everyone else involved. Claire had not stayed silent because she lacked courage. She stayed silent because patience gave her a better chance of protecting me. I reached into my coat and held the flash drive for a moment before slipping it back into my pocket. What is on it? Michael asked. I do not know. Then we need to open it. I slowly shook my head. No. Claire wanted me to find it. She also wanted someone else to believe I had not. Michael frowned. What are you thinking? I smiled for the first time that day, although there was very little joy behind it. Everyone believes Claire made a mistake. Everyone believes I am reacting emotionally because my secretary was arrested. Let them keep believing that. He studied me carefully before a faint smile crossed his own face. You finally understand what she has been doing. I looked out at the city again as sunlight finally broke through the clouds, reflecting across rows of office windows. Claire had not become the bait by accident. She had chosen to step into the spotlight because she knew every hidden observer would begin watching me instead of searching for what she had already hidden. She had never been the victim inside this game. She had quietly become the first player to move. And for the first time since that phone call before dawn, I realized the next move belonged to me. I have learned that the most dangerous move in any game is not attacking too early. It is letting your opponent believe they have already won. By the time Michael and I left the old library, the city had settled into its usual rhythm. Yellow taxis crowded the avenues. Office workers hurried beneath umbrellas. Coffee shops overflowed with people discussing ordinary problems. Meanwhile, somewhere inside that same city, someone believed Claire Bennett was sitting alone in a holding cell while I desperately searched for a way to rescue her. I intended to protect that illusion. I returned to my headquarters through the front entrance instead of using the private garage. I greeted employees exactly as I always did. I attended 2 scheduled meetings. I signed contracts. I even allowed Ethan Cole to walk into my office with the monthly financial reports tucked neatly beneath his arm. He smiled with the same quiet professionalism I had trusted for years. "Rough morning?" he asked after noticing the untouched cup of coffee on my desk. "Something like that," I replied. He shook his head sympathetically. "I heard about Claire. I cannot imagine how difficult this must be for everyone." His voice was flawless. His concern sounded genuine. If I had not spent the past several hours uncovering hidden patterns, I would have believed every word. Instead, I watched something else. His eyes never looked toward Claire's empty desk. They drifted for only a fraction of a second toward my coat, hanging beside the office door, toward the pocket where the flash drive rested. It was almost invisible. Almost. "Do you think she is guilty?" I asked casually. Ethan sighed. "I hope not. But sometimes people surprise us." I nodded slowly. "Yes, they do." He left a few minutes later without another unusual word, but I noticed one final detail after the door closed. He had forgotten to ask me to approve the quarterly investment summary. Ethan never forgot unfinished business. Today his real purpose had not been financial reports. It had been confirming whether I still possessed the flash drive. I waited exactly 20 minutes before making my next move. Then I instructed my assistant from Human Resources to send an internal email announcing that my office computers would undergo emergency security upgrades beginning that afternoon. Every device would be disconnected from the network for 24 hours. The message reached every executive within minutes, including whoever had been waiting for me to connect Claire's flash drive. If someone expected to monitor my systems, they would suddenly lose that opportunity. An hour later, my private phone vibrated once. No caller identification. Only a text message containing 7 words. "Good. He still has not opened it." I stared at the screen without moving. They were watching more closely than even Claire had suspected. The message had not been sent to threaten me. It had been sent to reassure someone else. They believed I remained exactly where they wanted me. I immediately deleted the message, powered off the phone, and placed it inside a signal blocking case that Claire herself had purchased almost 2 years earlier after insisting every executive needed better digital security. At the time I laughed and told her she worried too much. She simply smiled and answered, "One day you will thank me." Standing alone inside my office, I looked across the room toward her empty chair. For 7 years, I believed Claire Bennett managed my schedule. The truth was far more humbling. Every ordinary day, she had quietly managed my survival. And now, while everyone else believed she was trapped behind locked doors, I finally understood that she had never been trying to escape. She had been patiently waiting for the right person to reveal themselves. The text message proved that moment had finally arrived. The hardest decisions I have ever made were never about money, territory, or influence. They were about deciding when the truth had finally become strong enough to stand on its own. That evening, I left my office through the same revolving doors I had used for years, allowing every camera in the lobby to record my departure. Anyone watching would see exactly what I wanted them to see. A tired executive leaving after an exhausting day. Nothing more. Instead of driving home, I changed vehicles 3 times before arriving at a small technology laboratory on the outskirts of Brooklyn. The building carried no company logo and no public listing. Only 3 people knew it existed. Claire had recommended it nearly 2 years earlier after quietly telling me that sometimes the safest experts were the ones nobody had ever heard of. Inside, an older engineer named Samuel Ortiz greeted me without asking unnecessary questions. He placed the flash drive inside a standalone forensic system that had never been connected to the internet. Every wireless signal inside the room had already been disabled before I arrived. We waited in complete silence while the machine examined the device. 5 minutes felt like an hour. Then Samuel looked up with an expression I had never seen on his face before. "This is not storage," he said quietly. "It is bait." My eyes narrowed. "Explain." He enlarged several lines of encrypted code on the monitor. "If anyone inserts this into an ordinary computer, it immediately sends a silent signal to a remote server before opening anything. Whoever designed it would instantly know the location, the time, and the device used." I slowly closed my eyes. Claire had known. She had hidden the drive because she never intended for me to use it immediately. She wanted the people searching for it to grow impatient. Samuel continued working, carefully separating the hidden files from the tracking program without activating either. 20 minutes later, he handed me a printed report instead of the drive itself. Read this first. I scanned the pages one by one. They contained transaction records, internal communications, and access logs connecting Ethan Cole to shell companies that quietly received confidential information for years. Every suspicious pattern Claire had documented now had supporting evidence. But one final page stopped me completely. It was a scanned photograph taken from a security camera almost 18 months earlier. Claire stood inside my office after everyone else had gone home. Ethan had entered carrying a folder. He believed nobody was watching. He smiled politely while placing paperwork on my desk. Claire smiled back. Then, as Ethan turned to leave, Claire quietly photographed the documents after he walked away. She had suspected him long before anyone else. She simply kept collecting facts instead of making accusations. I folded the report carefully and thanked Samuel before leaving. My phone remained powered off until I reached my car. When I finally turned it back on, one new message appeared from Lieutenant Brooks. Claire had been officially cleared. The financial charges had been withdrawn because of procedural errors discovered during the investigation. Exactly as she predicted. She was free. Yet she had not called me. She had not returned to the office. She had not even gone home. Instead, the lieutenant attached one final note she had left before walking out of the precinct. It contained only one sentence written in her familiar handwriting. If everything happened the way I expected, do not come looking for me. Finish what I started first. I stared at those words until the screen slowly dimmed. For 7 years, Claire had quietly protected my future without asking for anything in return. Now she was asking for exactly one thing. Not revenge. Not rescue. She was asking me to choose the truth over my emotions. And for the first time in my life, I intended to deserve the loyalty she had already given me. People often ask how an empire survives. They expect me to talk about strategy, influence, or money. The truth is far simpler. An empire survives because someone is willing to protect it when nobody is watching. 3 weeks after Claire walked out of the precinct, every piece of evidence she had quietly collected had reached the proper authorities through channels that could not be traced back to either of us. The investigation unfolded exactly as she predicted. Financial records were verified. Hidden accounts were uncovered. Internal audits exposed years of carefully concealed deception. Ethan Cole resigned before anyone publicly questioned him, believing he could disappear before the truth reached him. He was wrong. Facts have a patience that people rarely appreciate. They eventually arrive, no matter how carefully someone tries to delay them. I never celebrated. There was nothing to celebrate. I had spent years believing I understood every corner of my own organization, while the person sitting 10 feet from my office quietly protected me from dangers I never even noticed. That realization humbled me far more than any enemy ever could. Claire never contacted me during those 3 weeks. I honored her request. I did not search for her. I finished what she started. Only after every loose end had been secured did I unlock the drawer of my desk, where I had placed her handwritten note. I read it one final time before folding it carefully and slipping it inside my wallet. Then I drove to the one place she had always escaped whenever life became too loud. A small botanical garden overlooking the Hudson River. She once told me the gardens reminded her that the strongest things in the world rarely grew overnight. I found her sitting on a weathered wooden bench, reading a novel with a paper bookmark tucked neatly between the pages. She looked up as though she had expected me to arrive at exactly that moment. "You finished it," she said softly. "Yes." She closed the book without asking another question because she already knew the answer. We sat in comfortable silence while the afternoon breeze carried the scent of fresh flowers through the garden paths. For the first time in 7 years, there were no meetings waiting for us, no schedules to review, no urgent phone calls demanding her attention. "I brought your office keys," I finally said, placing them gently on the bench between us. She smiled but did not reach for them. "I do not think I am coming back." Those words should have sounded like a resignation. Instead, they sounded like freedom. I nodded slowly because this time I understood the difference. "Then I owe you something." She looked genuinely confused. "You do not owe me anything." I laughed quietly. "That is exactly why I do." I reached into my coat and handed her a small envelope. Inside was not a contract, a bonus, or another set of office credentials. It was the deed to a foundation established in her name, dedicated to helping young professionals build honest careers through scholarships and mentorship. No speeches, no publicity, no headlines. Just an opportunity for someone else to receive the kind of quiet support she had given me for years. Claire's eyes glistened as she looked at the document before carefully folding it closed. "You finally noticed," she whispered. I smiled because she was right. I had finally noticed. Not the paperwork she organized, not the meetings she scheduled. I noticed the person who had spent years protecting my future without ever asking to stand in the spotlight. As we walked toward the garden exit together, I realized the greatest mistake of my life had not been trusting the wrong person. It had been taking the right person for granted. Money can buy loyalty for a season. Power can demand obedience for a while. But genuine loyalty is never purchased. It is earned quietly, protected faithfully, and recognized only by those willing to open their eyes before it is too late.